Hi, my name is Karen Bea, and I've been a violist in the Phoenix Symphony for over 25 years. This video is to help you be successful at your Arizona Regional and All-State audition coming up. So we're going to talk through each of the excerpts, and I'm going to play them for you as well. So let's start with number 1. The first excerpt is the Moldau, written by Smetana. And with any piece that you're playing an excerpt from, it is important to know a little bit about the whole piece. So the Moldau is actually the name of a river, and the piece sort of follows the flow of the river as it goes through different territory. The section that is being asked of you to play is from a section where the river is passing through a village, and so it has this folk dance quality to it. Well, if you look at the music, Smetana has actually told you exactly how to make that happen. You'll notice staccatos, accents, and also these little swells with the dynamics. All of those articulations and dynamics really help give that folk song feel to the music. And it's important that you keep that in mind as you perform this. Moving on to excerpt number 2, which is the Jupiter Symphony by Mozart. Now, in addition to knowing the background of the piece, it's really helpful to listen to multiple recordings of the pieces so you get an idea of the entire work, including all the parts from the orchestra. This particular piece may be mismarked on your music. It is not Symphony number 1. It is number 41, the Jupiter Symphony of Mozart. Hopefully you're able to find it on YouTube pretty easily. So unlike Smetana, Mozart didn't give us a whole lot of detail as far as the dynamics in this piece. You see a forte at the beginning, and that's it. Does that mean that you just play it absolutely the same all the way through? No. We're going to try to make some phrasing happen, and you're going to bring that music to life by showing the direction of the notes as the eighth notes, for instance, go up in measures 413 and 414. You might want to crescendo with that to show the direction of the line. Mozart would have expected that from the musicians playing his music. So we want to add that idea of phrasing, the musicality, bringing the notes to life, not just a plain, simple forte. Now, I talked about listening to recordings. One of the main things you will get from the recording is a sense of tempo. How fast do you play your excerpts? Well, there's a couple of indications. First of all, Mozart himself wrote the words molto allegro. What does that mean? That means very fast. But there's still a lot of room for interpretation there. Another useful tool would be going back to those recordings, and if you listen to multiple recordings, you'll hear some variation of tempo. Which tempo is the right one? Well, it's really something that is interpreted by the conductor, and in this case, by you, because you don't have a conductor. So, what are you going to decide about your tempo? Well, I want you to think about one other aspect, which is that people are going to prefer to hear something really clean and clear and crystal, and maybe a little bit slower, than hearing it as fast as possible and coming close to a train wreck all the time. So remember to play within your own abilities, a tempo that works for you and shows you at your best. One more thing, if you're playing an audition, you know what happens. You get nervous, your heart rate speeds up, likely your excerpts are going to speed up as well. So practice maybe just a little bit slower than you think you can play it cleanly, and then let that adrenaline push you just right into the perfect tempo when it comes time to the audition. So, excerpt number 3 is from March Slav by Tchaikovsky. So in the first excerpt, we talked about the articulations, and that's what I'm really listening for when a student performs it for me. In number 2, it's fast, and we want it to be musical. What is difficult about number 3? Well, if you look at it, there's a lot of flats. We've got 5 flats. So that means we are actually in the key of B flat minor. This puts us in some interesting territory for pitch on our instrument. And you'll see even in the first measure, you've got E natural and D flat right next to each other. And those are what we call an augmented second. They look like they're only 1 step apart, but they're actually 1.5 steps apart. So this is really important to key into that and make sure that you're playing really well in tune. Let's look at the dynamics. Oh wait, there aren't any. It just says triple forte the whole time. So we're looking for a really big, powerful sound. Tempo, well, it just tells us in the mode of a funeral march. So remember that it shouldn't be too fast, right? Because you wouldn't be running at a funeral. So all of these things will give you some idea of how to play March Slav. One other thing to note, at the end, in measure 75, we have this rhythm, da 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 da. That's not a rhythm we usually play in the viola part. That's actually more of a snare drum part. So we're going to make sure that the F is a short note to give it that feel of the snare drum. To number 4, which is not required for the regional audition, but is indeed required for the all-state audition. So definitely some tricky things going on here. So let's talk about the things we talked about in the first excerpts. Articulation. What have we got in this excerpt? Well, we definitely have accents, and it's important to note where they are. And dynamics, well, it's mostly loud and louder, but there is a crescendo. So the one crescendo that is marked there, we want to make sure that we pay attention. Get some points on the board for following those dynamics exactly as Weber specified here. Okay, so then on the second excerpt we had talked about tempo. Let's talk about tempo here. Allegro marcato con molto fuoco. Remember that every piece of music that you play, you want to figure out what those words mean. There's a lot of times there's extra words, usually not in English, and they are a way for the composer to communicate with you. So you want to make sure that you understand exactly what they're looking for. Allegro marcato con molto fuoco, a marked fast tempo with lots of fire. So this is going to go pretty fast, and we do want it to go fast for this all-state audition. It's also fortissimo right at the beginning, so fast and furious, and that's hard. But as I mentioned before, we definitely don't want to go faster than we can do cleanly and beautifully. What about tricky notes? Number 3 had some tricky notes for that weird key. Well, we do have some tricky notes in this one. We have C flat, we have E double flat, things that we don't normally see. So please take the time to figure out where your half steps and whole steps are so that your left hand, you know exactly what the shape will be, the pattern of notes before you play it. And I'm specifically referring to measures 20 and 21 are the hard ones. Our brain has a hard time wrapping around all of those flats instantly. So just focus on your half steps and whole steps to get those figured out. For bowing, I would highly recommend that you don't play with too much bow on the tied quarter note because it really puts you in the wrong part of the bow for the triplets following it. So if we save bow on the tied quarter notes, we'll stay in the lower half for those fast notes that come afterwards. One other thing, of course, we always want to make it musical. So he gave us a crescendo in measure 20, and the dynamics are loud and louder, so there's not a whole lot of room here, but always think about the direction of the phrase. Are we going somewhere without speeding up? We don't want to run like someone's chasing us. Excerpt number 5 is actually by my favorite composer, Brahms. This is from Symphony number 3. Brahms was a pianist, and he would prefer if we had bows that were like a mile long. So he loved to write these phrases that just kept going. And in fact, some of the pieces that you see by Brahms have these, it looks like you're supposed to hold one bow for 7, 8, 9 measures. And that's really because he was thinking of it as one phrase, and the inconvenience of the length of our bow was less of a concern for him. So right here at the beginning of this, we want to make sure that we are getting that effect of really smooth and connected bow strokes to give that legato effect across it. Let's talk about the dynamics. We finally have some contrast in this one. We start off with piano, and don't forget, you got to know every word on the page. It says gracioso. So he's not only telling you to play quietly, but gracefully. He's telling you about the character of the piece, what he's looking for in the sound quality here. So that's really important. We do have a drop to pianissimo in the second line. And then after we switch to 6/4 time, we go to a forte. And notice that in measure 8, we have not only forte, but another one of those Italian words, agitato. So now he wants it agitated. What does that mean, agitated? Well, it can definitely mean a little bit of a push of tempo, but it can also just mean an intensity with the sound and also with your vibrato that will really help change the character of the sound here in that section. I did mention the time signature, so we have 9/4 and 6/4 in this excerpt. These are what we call compound time signatures, where you have 3 segments of each big beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Most composers would have written it in 6/8 and 9/8, 12/8 with 8s instead of quarters. That is a lot more common. We see that a lot more. But it's the same thing. It's still divided in 3 segments, each large beat. Notice in measure 6, you have a quarter note with 2 quarter rests followed by 8th notes. I have heard a lot of students get a little derailed here. If you are playing this whole piece, there are actually 8th notes throughout the orchestra. Da 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 da. So you wouldn't want to step on anybody's toes and come in early. So make sure that you're really counting in that measure. If you're playing this at an audition, probably the person that's listening to you knows the whole piece. When I play this, the rest of the instruments are there in my head, and if I stepped on their notes and came in early, it would be disturbing to the music. So make sure that you're really counting there. And again, go back to your recordings and you'll have that orchestra in your head as well. It's very, very helpful for an effective performance of a piece like this.